Hello and welcome to our webinar looking at how digital technologies can improve the delivery of capital projects in the energy and natural resources industries. My name is Rob Jones, partner at B2B Connect, and I'll be your host. Our plan today is to explore the growth in use of digital technologies within capital projects, and we have an expert panel from around the world to discuss this. A month ago, we held a roundtable discussion on this subject. We gathered about 15 senior people from different parts of the Middle East's oil and gas sector to discuss in detail their organization's use of digital technologies, either their planned use or their current use for capital projects. Understandably, awards experienced a huge downturn in 2020 due to the pandemic. This is a situation that is turning around now in 2021, with the awards outlook looking far more positive. As you can see, the value of capital projects in the GCC is expected to bounce back this year. Early signs are that it will reach about $41 billion. And so far, it's looking like it could meet that level. About $20 billion have already been awarded just in Q1, which is obviously half of what's expected. And it's also 3 times the amount that were awarded just in 2020. Now, research by Boston Consulting Group found that the decline in upstream capital projects and spending in capital projects was much higher in 2020 due to the pandemic than it was for 2014 when the oil prices collapsed. And you can see that here in this screen with a 34% decline. Saudi Aramco announced its results last week, and its capital spending follows a fairly similar pattern to the BCG research. So you can see that last year, 2019, it spent about $27 billion, on capital spending, on capital projects, which was a decline of about 18%, but still within range of what it forecast, which was $25 to $30 billion. For 2021, we can see that capital spending is going to rise to about $35 billion, which is an increase of about 30%. And again, slightly below forecast of $40 to $45 billion, but still a good recovery and a good increase. Now, interestingly, with the results from Saudi Aramco were the comments by Amin Nasser, CEO, where he said quite squarely that the rollout and use of digital technologies has significantly enhanced the company's performance. We have Badr Burshaid from Saudi Aramco speaking today, actually, and this is something we're going to go into in a little bit more detail, looking at future plans. Now, with this in mind, turning back to the research that we've conducted, digitalization is increasingly being seen as the key differentiator for organizations working with major national and international oil companies. And some argue it's already imperative. Digitalization is streamlining processes, offering productivity benefits, and becoming the backbone for many of the advancements and innovations that are happening today. But at the moment, there's a lack of consensus about which aspects of digitalization are most important, with a wide array of different digital technology projects underway. So when we held the roundtable a month ago, we had the author of the report that looked at what's happening with digital technology projects around the world. So she's from Independent Project Analysis, and she was looking at how companies are planning to use digital technologies in capital projects. Through her research, she found about 65% of oil companies interviewed do have digitalization plans, but also identified about 185 projects across that project lifecycle being implemented, which you can see in the chart produced here by IPA. Broadly, though, the CapEx stage companies said that they're embracing digitalization to improve productivity within a project, to keep it on its progress on track, to reduce costs, and to improve safety. For most companies, though, underpinning all of these core aims was the need to improve the quality of their data so that they can use it to make better decisions and real-time decisions. Whilst companies recognize the need to invest in digital technologies, progress was markedly different throughout the region. So, as I said, when we were doing our research, we spoke to a number of different people from the oil and gas sector, and then did some follow-up calls afterwards. I mentioned the Aramco CEO and his comments about the importance of digital technology, and Aramco really have been using digital technologies for quite some years now and continue to plan their use for the future. With others, what we found were that they were really at the planning stage, working with consultants to better understand their needs and how digitalization will benefit them. Or they were producing internal guidelines on the use of digital technologies. Something else that came up was the idea of breaking pilot projects into smaller chunks, an approach that was seen to be easier to manage, it was easier to control, produces faster results, and cheaper than a big bang. And again, what was interesting here was people talked about the need to include stakeholders in these sort of projects, get the data in order, and think about decision makers and what they're looking for. Key digitalization subjects. So these are the subjects that, when I reviewed the interviews, these are the technologies that came up most often. So data, the cloud, IoT, artificial intelligence, and perhaps surprisingly, predictive maintenance. Now, data is clearly an important part of any digitalization plan. And the feedback we got was it's really important to get it right at the beginning of your project. Equally, a fairly common answer I got when I asked people about data was, I know I have loads of data, I know it's really important, but right now I don't really know what it's telling me. And they were aware that they need to have the people in place who can really understand how to manage that data properly, to ensure it has that integrity, and then to get answers. And again, this is something we'll talk about today in the webinar. The cloud also was very interesting because I thought this was really kind of a cut and dry technology. It's been around for a number of years. People understand how to use it. It's secure. But actually, what we found when reviewing the feedback from people was it's far more nuanced. There was a lot of discussion around data security, which bits of data should maybe have different rules applied to it, and that sort of thing. So again, this is something we'll definitely look at today and explore in terms of trying to understand how to use the cloud in capital projects. So feedback from today's webinar and from the roundtable that we conducted a month ago is being gathered and put into an insight report, which will look at the use of digital projects or digital technologies, sorry, in capital projects. That report will be available in about 1 month. As I said, we have a lot to discuss, so I'll hand over now to Geoff Roberts, Director of Global Industry Strategy for Energy and Resources at Oracle Construction and Engineering. Geoff will look at digitalization and innovation, so its impact on capital projects, its value, and why it's not an easy fix. Geoff.
Thank you, Bob. So let me go straight into it. The discussion is the key to this. So if we think about Industry 4.0, which is well and truly on the map, these are just 10 of the disruptive technologies that are actually being seen across the industry. So when we talked about the IPA report, it's really, which way do I go? And I think that's what organizations are struggling with in terms of, which is the right technology that will deliver the most value. Understanding that it is disruptive, it does change how you have to do business. So, these are just 10. Obviously, there is many more. And this was from BCG. Then we have another analyst, McKinsey, talking about Project 5.0. And again, you can see in item 5, It's all about data-driven digital technologies that will deliver these potential improvements that organizations are all striving for. At the end of the day, that's why digital is becoming, and digitalization is very important, because it actually provides that next step in productivity and improvement in actual costs. That's why organizations, everybody on this call, is actually looking at how that innovation and digitalization can work. And if we think about those core areas, there's obviously the true industrialization, typical modular offsite construction. That's becoming more and more baked. New materials, we're starting to see, definitely they're becoming broader and how they're engaged in the actual construction. The third one is potentially the biggest eye-opener here. There have been 3,000 new products released to market in the construction space around digitalization and innovation in the last 3 years. Hence, I think that's why there's a level of confusion within the actual owner and contractor organizations on which is the right technology, which is the right approach to go with digitalization. If we think about core products like, ERP, scheduling, there have been much lesser numbers, and it's really, you can very quickly analyze those and decide which route. With these new innovations that are coming on board all the time, there is a vast plethora of innovation technologies that are out there and new products, and it's how to sift through those to make sure that you actually move forward with the right ones. So what we're seeing is that these are the digital trends that are confronting them. It's a horrible eye chart, I know, but in essence, there is an awful lot of technology out there. And if you think about each one of these technologies, there are multiple vendors that are actually providing this technology to the construction sector. So it's really how to move forward, how to make that selection. How is it going to impact your business? And that's what's causing the issue. Rob, drew attention to this graphic, which was from an IPA survey. Because of that issue where you have many technologies and many vendors delivering those technologies, what we're seeing is there is actually no area that's actually being chosen as the move forward in delivering innovation into capital projects. It's not in procurement, it's not in project controls, it's not in any of these areas. It's actually broadly spread across the whole of the asset delivery lifecycle. So, that's what we're seeing. To actually assist with this, from an Oracle perspective, we've actually developed the concept of an innovation lab to help people understand some of this technology in play. So we actually have those across in 3 parts of the world, and we'll continue to broaden that. So you can see, Oracle technology and innovative partner technology working in tandem. So that's how we're coming to play to support the construction industry. So I'll hand back, Rob, at this point.
Thank you, Geoff. I'll just unshare your screen.
Yep.
That's brilliant. And okay, so let's move, in that case, straight into the discussion. So first of all, I'm going to introduce everybody. Joining me here right now, we have Badr Burshaid, Program Director from Saudi Aramco, Keith Churchill, Manager of Construction Technology at Bechtel Global Corporation, Geoff, we've already met, but Geoff Roberts, Director of Global Industry Strategy for Energy and Resources at Oracle Construction and Engineering, Aref Boualwan, Strategy Officer, World Economic Forum and Group Manager for Digital Transformation at CCC, and John McVarish, Account Executive at Smart Video. So welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us. And I know for Keith and John, you're joining us very early in the morning, being based in the US. But I'll move straight away, I think, to Geoff. Now, Geoff, you just highlighted the IPA research, talking about the number of digital projects, the number of digitalization projects underway. We've also seen from things like the BCG research that due to the pandemic, there has been a bit of a decline in capital spending for capital projects. How are these two things being married? How are you marrying that increasing requirement for companies to digitalize and projects to be much more reliant on digital technologies with the fact that at the moment there is a little bit of a decline in spending around some capital projects? And what does this mean for companies in terms of what to consider for their plans? How do you give them focus?
I think we're seeing a significant growth in innovation and digitalization. And I think it's because it impacts performance and productivity. So it's about doing more with less. In essence, the CapEx budgets are, we saw that, down 18% last year. When that will grow back to what was, envisioned in the future can take some time. But in essence, they need to do more with less, and digitalization and innovation helps them do that. So, everybody on this call, their organizations are focused in developing and supporting innovation technologies into their organizations because it brings that enhanced performance, increased productivity, and therefore allows them to do more with less. That's really what it's about. It's about achieving, a greater value to the business. And that's what innovation does. And that's why you're seeing these programs, they're not stopping. They're not being stopped because there is a CapEx reduction. In essence, we're seeing an increase in some of these innovation capabilities. And again, you have people like Aref, who, his title is innovation in a significant company. We're seeing the growth of, chief innovation officers across the globe. That title is becoming ever more present in the C-suite because people understand the value it can bring.
So I think, Badr, I'm going to move to you because, as I said in the intro, I found the comments made by your CEO very interesting because he really was talking about the importance of digital technologies. And, that's a significant spend anyway that Aramco has on capital projects. So for you, with the plans you have, with what you've already done, what have been the most critical digital technologies that have really helped push forwards your capital projects?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. As you said, oil companies are emerging and establishing strategies to maximize and accelerate deployment of technologies in this arena to excel and competing business environment. Yes, the capital investment on most of the oil companies has been optimized, yet the technologies investment is really showing a really great high. In fact, Saudi Aramco have taken a drastic move of organizational restructure and creating a digital transformation office. And we have digital transformation officer at the level of vice president, actually. Concurrently, project management are establishing processes to commence deploying of AI concepts such as field augmented reality, visual reality that enhance the project performance. And reducing site inspection via using drones, for example, 3D laser scanning to capture the brownfield areas data, virtual fat acceptance tests that we can do it while we are in the offices. Those technologies are helped the project delivery during this global and multiple concurrent lockdowns, actually. In addition, in mitigating the risk of the travel during the COVID spikes, project management have identified 16 digital innovation domains that are being catalysts to rise the bar for project execution and delivery. For example, of those domains are smart workforce planning, field mobility, digital twin, terminus project updates, remote controlled field vehicles, and others. Also, project management is establishing technology KPI, in addition to performance KPIs, on scouting, deploying technologies into the capital programs.
So when you talk about 16 domains, is that what do you mean by the word domain? Is it like departments? So working on different aspects of digital technologies?
No, actually, what we created is several domains, for example, process automation, civil structural, downstream processes, upstream processes. And on those domains, we identify what is the applicable technologies that we could deploy in our capital program. So when we have the coming 3 years business plan of the capital program, and once we push it through those domains, we map all these technologies to those applicable domains. So we have a plan ahead of time, what kind of technologies that we want to deploy to those capital programs. It's like a checklist of all the digital technologies that we could deploy in our capital program.
Okay. So Aref, turning to you. Now, is there, I'm going to use the word typical path. I mean, I know it's not quite the right phrase, but is there a kind of a typical path that an organization would take when planning a major digital technology project? And I mean that in terms of hiring a consultant, understanding your requirements, building the internal structures, and maybe creating the departments, that sort of thing.
Brilliant. First, thanks for having me, Rob. It's great to be among this good crowd here. Your question probably, what's the silver bullet that we should use? First, probably the best way for me to illustrate that is to share our journey, what we've done internally within CC and the World Economic Forum, with the World Economic Forum, that would hopefully answer your question. When we started all that, we realized the first thing, Rob, that we cannot do it alone. So as part of the forum, we, along with BCG, and I really thank Geoff for putting the slides earlier from the World Economic Forum and BCG. So we thought we need to set the context. We agreed on 3 years project plan to design what would be the future of infrastructure or construction B, and reduce scenarios, extreme scenarios, and go back to see what implication we have today. So that set the context for us, realizing that we cannot do it alone. Then we thought either we go create a unit that Mr. Know-it-all unit, or a unit that will orchestrate a set of initiatives. And this is the way we went. So what we've done first, how we're going to implement all these technologies and where. We thought to democratize the process. We ran a survey to a group of engineers, the younger the better, usually, and millennial generation and middle age maximum, to come up with ideas how they can implement exactly the chart that Geoff said, one of more technology in that chart, against where in CCC, and they have to relate it to either internal process improvement or creating a new business line as an objective. And then say in terms of technology, what do they need, timeline, budget, etc., pilot. And for those, we approved like 10 to 15 projects initially 3 years back. And for each project, we established a committee with diversified subject matter experts to promote collaboration and innovation thinking. And we start implementing and rolling out things as a pilot. Soon we realized after that most of the technology we are exploring are still immature and evolving. So this is where we had to engage the startup. And we created a startup inclusion program. We bring the startup along with the committee, along with the pilot project, and this is where things start rolling out. And for those that we succeeded, because we didn't succeed in everything, and you have to accept that, we created still a strategic partnership with the startups, and most importantly, the next phase would be scaling this up across CC. And here where we develop method statement guideline procedure, and this becomes this technology, the successful one that proven the ROI will be part of our day-to-day operation and manual, and then other departments will take over to implement it like any other department. So in that, this is the journey. I'm a strong believer in that, we should democratize the process, create set of strategic initiatives, orchestrate them, and bring all players from outside the organization as well as the inside the organization, set the scene, and take them through the journey.
Okay, so I mean, in a way, you're talking about how you start to look at pilot projects for some of these different technologies, which I think is a good chance to turn to looking at that. So, as I was saying, with the research we've done so far, that's something that people talked about, was breaking up these pilot projects into smaller chunks and addressing them that way. If if they found that there were if there were no real benefits, move on. If there's clear benefits, engage with the decision makers. So Keith, I think turning to you, how is this a fairly typical approach that you break it into smaller parts, and how do you make sure that the benefits that are well understood? How do you make sure that you know what you're looking for from that pilot test and then can actually contextualize and that message?
Yeah, so how we approach it is we want to set up a business case right up front. We want to understand what are the things that we're trying to solve, what's the value of the things that we're trying to solve, and then how are we going to measure them, right? And a lot of times the things that we're working on are part of a bigger goal that lead to maybe some more larger returns on investments down the line. So we might be willing to accept smaller returns on investments up front, as long as we're building towards that bigger goal. And what we try to do is we try to have a set process where we source solutions, whether it's internal or external. We'll walk through a prototype phase. After the prototype phase is really when we go and try to get more funding for the initiative based on the performance of the prototype against the ROI KPIs that we had set up in the business plan. And then what we'll do is we'll take that and try to work out the kinks within our Welding and Applied Technology Center, which is located in Houston, and it's kind of an incubator for all things innovation for us, similar to what Oracle, on a much smaller scale, but similar to what Oracle has done in Chicago. And then what we'll do is, if it's successful there, and we want to work out the kinks, because when we go to the field, we really want to reduce the amount of headache that the field has to deal with. And there's going to be problems in the field. Everybody understands that when you're rolling something out, but we want to try to minimize that to the greatest extent possible. And what we'll do is we'll roll it to the field on a very controlled situation, and we want to make sure we identify the right people in terms of who we're going to test with, how open are they to technology, how open are they to give us the right feedback that we're looking for to improve the solution, and then how do we move, how do we pivot if we have to at that point. And if it's successful in the field, then we'll follow a similar path to CCC. We'll incorporate it into our processes and procedures, and then roll it out. And what we found is that a lot of times, if you try to take something that's off the shelf or an external solution, and you try to plug it into our current processes and procedures, the odds of it being successful are very small. And so what we want to try to do is, as we're working through these prototypes and field pilot stages, we really want to try to understand, what are we going to have to change within our processes and procedures? How are we going to have to train people differently? Does this present any safety issues, so that we can start I guess drafting those changes to the processes and procedures to maximize the return on investment.
See, now that's a really interesting comment that you're making, actually, because so you're talking about not just trying to bolt something in and then carry on doing it the same way you always have. Interestingly, I spoke to some people who said, if you can minimize how much change I have to make with a new piece of digital technology, then that makes it more attractive, which is almost the opposite of what you're saying, actually. So, I mean, are you saying, is it that they're just trying to say, okay, bring it in, if you could, when I use it, try to make sure I'm not having to make too much change? Or are you saying, actually, you're really going to have to just rethink how you use some of these things?
No, I think that you have to be open to change if you're going to take on a digital transformation project. If you're not, I think that you're going to be limited in the value that you see. And that's really based on the fact that all of our procedures in the past have been based off of paper. It's all been based off 2D. It's all been based off manual data input, or maybe no data input. And so if you think that you're going to be able to just come in and plug in a solution, it's going to be really difficult. And obviously, if that happens, that's fantastic, right? I think that's the goal that everybody looks at. But I think that when you get into, okay, we're not going to change our processes and procedures, we don't want to retrain our people, you get into a lot of customization. And obviously for these, especially on the application side of the fence, customization is a dirty word. And it raises costs for the application provider, it raises costs from a data storage perspective, and it raises costs from the end user perspective. And a lot of times it doesn't end up working out the way that you would think. And so a little bit of investment in changing processes and procedures, and maybe changing the way that we're thinking on projects, could pay huge dividends from an ROI perspective down the line.
Okay. We encourage questions. So if you do have a question, please use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen, and we'll get to those at the end of the webinar. John, I'm going to move to you now. So, I mean, there were some interesting comments there, actually, from Keith around how you need to think differently and change processes. I guess it's also important to make sure you're getting diverse perspective between your different stakeholders.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And likewise, gratitude for the opportunity to join you this morning or afternoon, depending on where you are in the globe. Yeah, I think, and we've heard this from a couple of the panelists so far today, that it's really important to have the right people involved. And I can only offer my perspective from the vendor side of things, that oftentimes early on in engagements, we're actually helping firms understand who are the right people, what other departments are involved or are going to be touched or impacted, potentially anyway, by this technology initiative. So the journey really begins well before the deployment of the technology on the pilot project. It really begins ages before, when we're talking about planning and hypothesis generation. So we're identifying and trying to address the question of what are the improvements that we're testing against, and what does good look like on the other side of the hypothesis. And then I find that oftentimes what my responsibilities lie in is really triangulating different opinions and perspectives, because sometimes, and particularly with our technology at smartvid.io, there's benefits afforded on the safety front that are appreciated differently than those afforded to financial personnel and project management personnel. So my responsibilities really lie in capturing the insights of the various departments and maintaining lines of open communication, and providing a format so that there's a constant feedback loop throughout the journey, pre-testing, post-testing, and then actually validating the hypotheses.
Okay, and Geoff, now, I mean, you've heard the comments of both Keith and John here. Looking at benefits, looking at how do you start to scale some of these things. Do some technologies have benefit, but not really an ROI? Is it that if you focus too much on the return on investment, maybe you don't see why you should be using this technology?
I think you have to be careful. There always has to be a business case and an ROI, let's be fair. That's why businesses move forward with technology. But as we've heard both from Aref and Keith about startups, you have to think about what that ROI is in the first place. You can't suddenly think you're going to save 20-30% by putting in something. You have to think about it in a far more realistic way. And 1 or 2% is a good number, especially if it can be, if you can achieve that across all of your portfolio. So, you cannot be greedy. And we often see innovation and digitalization projects fail because they set the business case number way too high. Now, you may achieve that ultimately, but initially you will never achieve that because of the items that Keith and Aref have raised. There is a process to go through to get these guys incubated, aligned. I love the piece that Keith talked about process. You have to align modern process to innovation and digital technologies. You can't go with your standard operating procedure. You're likely to have failed, and failed for all the wrong reasons, because that innovation technology could have actually delivered you some ROI. But if you insist on delivering the paper-based old approach, then you're not going to change your business. So yeah, I think you have to be incredibly careful. But yeah, you have to have a business case. There has to be an ROI, but don't try. And if you're looking for the sky-high numbers, they may come, but they're certainly not going to come straight off the bat. You want small increments, and small increments are good on. If we look at all of the organisations on the webinar today, small increment across a portfolio is a good number.
So Badr, I mean, you have been you've driven a number of digital technology projects. We spoke recently, and you were outlining some of the ones that you've done. So clearly this is something that you believe in and that you push. Are you taking the approach that has been talked about here, breaking it into small amounts, looking for the benefits? And also, once you start doing that, how are you thinking about scaling up those technologies? You're on mute as well at the moment. Have we just lost Badr? I'll tell you what, let's move. Okay, I think he must be having a problem with his connection. So what I'll do is I'll come back to him on that. In the meantime, Geoff, I'm going to go back to you. Okay. Looking at the main reasons companies digitalize. Now, when we were talking to companies, the ones that came up a lot, reduce costs, and that's interesting because obviously you're saying don't look for big numbers, improve safety. I think that's something that's actually increasingly becoming more important, and actually quite often to make more product. So what are the challenges you're typically seeing people try to solve?
People are trying to solve many issues, and I think that IPA survey that we showed is really what is causing more issues than anything else, in the fact that there's no one area that somebody's going, this is a quick win. And then not only is there that, there's not the focus area, but then you've got this plethora of vendors out there which are growing, as money becomes available from investors. We're seeing huge growth, as we saw in that McKinsey report. 3,000 new companies in the last 3 years in this space alone. So it causes problems for people like Aref and Keith and Badr to actually identify, okay, if I choose this area, I still have about 100 technology vendors that I could actually slot into this one particular area. So that is the challenge that we see. It's not like, as I said, an ERP or a scheduling tool where maybe there were 3 or 4 vendors. There's a de facto in the space. We'll just go with them. That was easy. In the new digitalization world, it's a much more difficult proposition for organizations. Hence why we have people like Aref and Keith, whose job, their total focus is about innovation. Their total focus is to actually sift through, hopefully not 3,000 vendors, but in essence, that's their job. They bring to their organizations that skill by identifying those nuggets.
Okay.
And more importantly, they're both prepared, and you'll see that across all big organizations, they're prepared to work with startups. Then they don't have to see a vendor that's got, many years in the industry. These folks see the value in startup type organizations on the fact that they can quickly prototype, pilot, and if necessary, move them back out of the program. But they're quite comfortable to work with that. And that's what we see. Organizations that really have an innovative strategy, happy to move forward with.
Yeah, and I think actually startups is a really interesting area that definitely needs to be explored more in terms of how to use startups, how to engage startups, but also how to make sure those startups don't get lost in a larger company machine. Badr, I think you're back with us now. So thank you. So I'll just go back to the question I was asking, which was, we were talking about pilot studies and how you approach pilot studies. So I think it would be interesting to hear from the Aramco side of things, how you approach them, because you've done so many. And also, how do you then start thinking about scaling up those pilot studies that you think are a success so that they become if you like, a full production technology?
Sure. First of all, in project management, we are advocating for digital technologies in 4 streams. First, as we approach the ready solution for adoptions, utilizing available proven technology and solutions from the industry, and similar to Oracle's and others. Second, we have established a digital culture enhancement. We work in creating a culture within the organization at all levels. In fact, we are approaching universities for master degrees to enhance the knowledge of digital transformation within the company. Third pillar, as we go through the advanced solutions, we build a new system or platforms to take full advantage of artificial intelligence advanced analytics, machine learning, to enhance the project execution and management. Fourth pillar is the workflow flow and process automations, utilizing the corporate automation platform to digitize manual processes, workflows, and KPIs. Now, how is our approach? When we do go and after the solutions and digital arena, we have four processes. First is we scouting technologies. We scout the old technologies, whether it's proven or whether it's a startup, whether we know the value of it or we're still exploring the value of technologies across the domains, the 14 domains I said to you before. Then we go on deployment. We pilot those technologies and digital solutions in lower scales. And once we know their performance and their added value, we go and mandate them in the capital programs. So that will make sure the value of those technology and digital solutions are really maintained. And in addition to all of that, we have established a new center called Lab 7. Lab 7 is after the well number 7, which is the prosperity well, the first well of oil in Sudan. What is that Lab 7 is all about? It's all about an incubator of all digital and technologies in Saudi Arabia. So we call on all the local and international inventors and technology creators into that lab so they can create, deploy, test, and mandate to those technologies in Saudi Aramco and all Saudi Arabia in general.
Okay. So I think we'll explore some of that lab work that you're doing, the Lab 7 work, in a little while actually, because I think that's quite interesting. But before we do, just going back to, I want to talk a little bit about employees, because again, or the staff that are working in these projects, because no digital technology project is going to be successful if the people who will be using it aren't embracing it and aren't believing in it, and I suppose in a way aren't thinking that this is just being done to replace me. So Aref, when you're looking at that side of things, how do you take the people who are working on these technologies along, or who will use these technologies, sorry, how do you take them along on that journey?
I'm happy, Rob, you bring up on this important topic. I mean, any digital transformation would have at least 3 dimensions: the tech, the processes, and the people. So you're touching on the people, and probably Geoff knows best here that even during the 3rd industrial revolution, where ERP falls under, where it's far less complex than implementing technology now, as he's mentioned, even then, statistics show that most of the reason of failure of ERP implementation is from people and change management, not from technology or processes. So this is really, that's statistically by Gartner, one of the statistics. So showing that the element of people, I mean, take ERP like Oracle, it's proven ERP, yet you see many organizations varies with the implementation cycle. So the fear that people have is part of a bigger thing, that's change management. Let me just here, probably the best way to illustrate this, probably you know it, John Scully, and he was at the time John, CEO of PepsiCo. He told him, do you want to sell sugar water for the rest of your life, or join me, change the world? If we learn anything from that, is creating a purpose for a change management, for in principle, for digital transformation in specific. And this is where you motivate people to bring them together rather than only tackling their fears. And talking about change management and purpose, one can't ignore the fact that millennial generation is proven now that wouldn't work for a company which doesn't have a clear purpose. They don't want to work just to get a job. And once you have that purpose and set it in the right context, you'll be surprised. Employees would enjoy the journey, although sometimes they don't know where they're going, where it's going to take them, or they wouldn't know the destination that are arriving. So bringing people, especially millennial generation, creating purpose is very important. When it comes to seniors, and this is more challenging, I would really put senior in 3 categories. That's my experience. Team A, let's say, forward thinkers, they will take it over and even lead the implementation for you. And this is where these are their champion. You want to start with that with any pilot. Don't go but team A. If you have no team A in the company, hire team A. You need team A from senior staff who have authorities. Team B, who are passive, will let you do your job, wouldn't hinder you, but they wouldn't go out of their way to support you in that implementation. This is excellent team to roll it out after proving the technology. After team A, this is where you scale things up, and hopefully you don't have much of team C who would hinder intentionally for whatever reason. And it's not only fear, it's comfort zone. Many people have been doing something for 30 years, and you're coming, Mr. Tech guy, telling me that there's a better way of doing things now. You're sitting back in Athens, in the sunny Athens, and you're coming now here to the desert and teach me how to do construction. I mean, you would have that challenge, how to sell people. So you have to be careful how to categorize the team and the employees you have. And most importantly, as I said in the beginning, create a purpose before you do anything. If you don't create a purpose, you cannot do digital transformation.
I mean, that's very interesting. And I mean, you know, technology is kind of littered with failed projects through history, where I think the people haven't really been taken on board, and maybe even the technology companies sometimes don't take on board the processes that people need to go through to be able to do their job effectively. So I think there's, to some extent, maybe even a little bit of that direction that needs to happen as well, to make sure that actually everybody is moving in the same direction for these projects. I think, why don't we look at some of the specific projects that people talked about and get some examples and some case studies. I'll start with Keith. And I think we talked a lot about, or I talked about data. I think Geoff did as well. And, you know, every time a conversation about digital technology comes up, data is always in there somewhere, because it's just so critical, but particularly now with IoT, which is generating so much data. Now, you've talked about hiring data scientists, or your company hiring data scientists to better manage and understand the data that's being generated. And what interested me about that is because, you know, just recently I was talking to somebody who was saying exactly the same thing, that he was in the process of hiring data scientists to better understand and you know, what was happening, and people who could actually put that into visuals that everybody could understand.
Yeah, so we've taken on a big data analytics group that we felt, you know, I think that the common theme is construction companies have a lot of data, and we need to be able to leverage that data. And so we were really excited. We still are very excited about the technology and about the group. I think some of the challenges that we've seen within the company is that as we go from project to project, or business unit to business unit, business line to business line, we start to see that things that should be simple, like a cubic yard of concrete on a progress report, is not always a cubic yard of concrete from one project to the other. And so as we started to dig in, and as we started to try to identify trends and identify certain things that were happening on projects, and help with the data analytics perspective on our projects, what we were seeing, especially during the proposal projects, is what we were seeing is that we were getting kind of wonky results. And as we started to dig into it, we found that, you know, people were combining things into, you know, these reports and maybe changing things in order to favor themselves in terms of performance. And when you do that, it really hurts from a data analytics perspective. And so we've gone through a very extensive process to try to normalize our data and really set up the processes and the requirements in terms of data reporting, data generation, how we receive data. We really want unbiased data, and I think IoT really helps with that in terms of taking the person out of the collection of the data. And as we continue to do that, we can start to build a more complete and substantive database that helps us to drive actionable analytics down the line.
But that's I think easier said than achieved, you know, particularly making sure that data has no bias, but also data can come from so many different sources now, so many different places.
Yeah, that's right. And so we've set up systems to try to help us identify, you know, when things come in and they're a little bit off, we can identify that and have people look at it. We want to put things into the database that we know are going to be sound and normalized and help us in the future. And if we don't set those requirements up front with any company that we're working with, whether it's an IoT company, whether it's an AI company, anywhere where we're getting data, we have to be able to reduce the I guess the variance in the actual data that we get. And if we set these requirements now, we have to stick to them, we have to be accountable, and we have to be disciplined, and it'll pay huge dividends down the line.
Okay. I'm going to move to you, John, but before I do, I can see questions are coming in, so please do continue to ask your questions and we'll get to them at the end. John, for you, I mean, you must be capturing tons of data. Now, I know that what you're trying to do is identify risk. So how are you ensuring the integrity of that data so that you're getting meaningful results?
Great point. Yeah, so to kind of break that down, there's almost two parts to that. The first part is the data integrity element, and then the latter half, which is making sure that the insights that are being generated are actually meaningful. So to address the first one, I would say that when you begin with the end in mind, you capture and you store data differently. And it's been alluded to, the biggest issues in our industry when it comes to data, it's not necessarily the lack or the amount of data that's being captured by various devices and personnel. It's the data that lacks purpose beyond the immediate capture of it. Now it's smart. Actually, my CEO, Josh Canner, was on a panel similar to this last week, where he actually cited a statistic, I think it was by BCG, saying in the construction industry, particularly here in the States, over 96% of data that's captured never gets used beyond the moment of its capture. So at SmartVid, we are ardent supporters of the theory or program of predictive-based safety. And the foundational elements there are the capture and analysis of data that leads to insights and action. So that is, so when we talk about the integrity, that is the end that we look for when the data is being gathered from the field. So what does that mean? It's the first thing that we look for when we're working with our customers. It's that the data can be commingled with other data sets. So the data that we generate or that we're analyzing, can it be overlaid with timesheet data, for example? Does it include do things such as project ID numbers that act as almost a Rosetta Stone so that data can be overlapped on top of one another? That is kind of a key component here, because lacking that hinge, all you have is just digital paperweights of what was, rather than something that can be repurposed and useful to generate meaningful insights. So that second item of ensuring the insights being generated are meaningful. We do have an advantage at SmartVid as the technology sponsors of the Predictive Analytics Strategic Council, which is a consortium of owners, insurance carriers, and general contractors from here in the States and a few global partners, which affords us a really diverse perspective on how AI insights can afford maximum value. It's a really neat committee where the members are actually really transparent, because the mission is all around safety, which is, I think, the one area where folks are really not afraid to be sharing their best practices. On the insight side of things, though, on the macro level, how do we ensure that we're generating meaningful insights? It really comes down to, are we sharing business intelligence with leaders that alter and shift strategy? And are we fact checking that we're actually doing that? And to close out on the micro level, on the project level and in the moment, it's really behavior oriented. I mentioned earlier, we talk with our clients during the hypothesis generation phase. What does good look like? One of the things we're looking for is, what behavior are we trying to impact? What are we trying to see more of? What are we trying to see differently? And then when we go into it, the engagements, we're looking to generate value on that project level by timely and meaningful insights that alter behavior. And then we try to measure it as best as darn possible.
Okay, so Badr, now John mentioned their predictive analysis, and I know, Badr, that's something that you're looking at as well. Tell me what plans you have in Aramco around starting to do more predictive analysis.
Well, that's a good question. Actually, in construction management, there is a general lag of comparison to other industries in terms of productivity, mainly due to the low utilization of advanced technologies. Saudi Aramco has gone through enormous efforts to support the industries, adoption to value-added technologies. Saudi Aramco has now been stopped to in preparing future of the new EPM center, Enterprise Project Management Center. That center that collects the entire data from the project live and have it into one center where we have all the project proactive data. We collect it and we make analysis out of it, so you can predict this project will be derailing with their safety and cost and schedule and what have you before it really happens. So you have time to react and have that project moving forward. Focusing on project management in the field will maximize the benefit realization of deploying those advanced technologies into the capital program.
So this is something, when do you think you'll start to be able to use this more actively?
Well, we already started the scope of work and the design of the EPM center. We have already the data in. That's the good part. We have the enterprise project management, which is EPM, which we have Oracle actually a partner with us on that. We have all the data live coming from the project. We could really, from now, we could predict the healthiness of each project. But that center will give you all the incubation of all technologies built into that center. Now we could see the future before it happened and the performance of the projects.
Okay. Geoff, I'm going to turn to you with the thorny question, which is cloud, because it caused a lot of debate. So, as we said, you know, cloud, you kind of think it's a cut and dried technology, it's in place, being used, but actually there do seem to be a lot of challenges around security of critical data and government restrictions. So what needs to be thought about? How do you overcome these? How do you make sure that dispersed teams can work together if they're not in the same geographic location?
Yeah, so cloud is, you know, as you say, it should be a go-to innovative digitalization technology. It's been around now for a number of years, and it has significant challenges. You know, one, security, obviously. Putting data out in somebody else's domain is always a concern to an IT focused individual in an organization. But it brings huge value in the fact that, you know, especially in capital construction, the projects are becoming more global. Interactions by that supply chain, you know, need to happen effectively. Collaboration needs to happen effectively. And actually the older thinking of, you know, punching holes in firewalls or sharing through email, you know, those are things that actually create more security issues than actually the cloud. But what we're seeing with the cloud, which is a shame to a certain extent, is that there are now more government restrictions coming around about where data can be located. So, you know, there are a number of you know, literally regions and countries around the world where we have to work, as do the other big technology providers. We have to work within the realms that they require. So data sovereignty, so bringing cloud to, or data centers to their regions, and to the point where the technology providers are actually thinking about, you know, cloud at customer as options, so they don't have to think about different technology streams from a vendor perspective. They can deploy the cloud technology in a cloud at the customer if that is ultimately what is needed. So we're having to rethink how we actually deliver our cloud applications and our cloud tools to organizations, understanding that the concept of a big overarching public cloud may not be an approach that actually is acceptable across the world.
So local data centers, local cloud.
Yeah, right down to cloud at customer, if necessary. Right. So, and everything in between.
So cloud at customer, if you're say in the US as part of the project team, you need to access data. Can you? I mean, is that data?
Yeah, it's basically a private cloud. It's in essence, it's a cloud owned by, say an Aramco or Bechtel. They own the cloud, but it actually is their data and their supply chain data. So it allows that supply chain interaction without punching holes through the firewall of an on-premise type system, which
So
is really.
I was going to say, how do you stop people if people have to access that data? It's down to what, the local rules to stop them say downloading that data to their machine in another country.
Yeah, it's down to local rules. It's down to the rules of the organization that actually is providing that private cloud.
Okay, so in other words, people being trained properly around security and making sure that they respect those rules.
Absolutely.
Okay. Aref, now you've got quite an interesting project, Aref, that you've been working on, which is around using artificial intelligence for screening employees on site. So give us some insight in terms of what you're doing there and what the benefits are.
Yeah, this is one of the most beneficial projects that we run lately. Basically, during the COVID, we're no exception. We wanted to bring everybody safe and healthy home while running our project up to the commitments we did towards our clients. So this was really a big challenge, especially in construction, which is it's a very man-based and a human being. The number of labor is extremely high. So we had people coming out from their camp, going to their site, to the project, then going out for lunch, going in. You had like many times for thousands of labor and employees, you had to screen them and stuff. You had to screen them for temperature during the day. This is one of the basic measures you would do prior to entering the site or the camp, etc. So this delayed our construction activity a lot. What we thought that why don't we try to implement an AI video analytics technology with thermal cameras to spot the temperature of the labor while they're walking normal speed without queuing. And this was the challenge. And we wanted to put in many places, in every entrance for the site, camp, name it, recreation area, stuff. So we implemented thermal camera, which reduced the automatic detected temperature with a plus or minus 0.3 degrees Celsius error, which fires an alarm whenever it goes beyond 37.3 Celsius. That's configurable, and it worked beautifully after a few trials, and we start rolling out to thousands of laborers in different countries. But what we realized, like probably all the gents here know, that you store data for one purpose, used for another purpose. So very soon we start using it for head count. We know now how many people are in which area, and then we thought, oh wow, why don't we implement facial recognition, and I can tell that Rob passed by this time, and then we implement facial recognition, and by being identified who went by at which point, that gave us information to our timesheet to generate timesheet automatically, or at least help in generating timesheet automatically. Then we thought we needed to have more governance on wearing masks, and we implement other technique, part of facial recognition, that will detect automatically if someone is not wearing his or her mask while walking on the site. So this was really a challenge with thousands of labor and stuff. And last but not least, we implement for video recording for security. So in case any incident takes place, so that's the same camera, the same set of cameras for one purpose, for temperature, and we ended up having it for 6 different purposes. And currently we have it in the few projects in the Gulf region and in Kazakhstan. And at this stage, we're developing the guideline and procedure to implement it in each and every project post-COVID, because the value for that goes beyond COVID era, that hopefully will end not soon.
Okay, and John, now you're using project imagery and AI to spot and highlight non-compliance on site, so areas of risk. Again, examples of use, please.
Yeah, absolutely. And Keith alluded to it earlier. One of the challenges is cultivating and managing objective data. Where we come in and there's nothing really more objective and unbiased than just a picture. It tells it's worth 1,000 words, I hear. Now our AI, Vinny, is his name, just like Apple has Siri. Vinny has no bias. He's trained to detect risk regardless of the situation. So the way that Vinny operates is that he scans the data and then makes observations and applies tags to individual frames, be they stitched together photos, which constitute a video, or an actual just progress photo in and of itself. Now, the end goal is all about sharing individual observations to change behavior, or we talked about earlier, providing insights that alter and shape strategy. So an example there, and what we're well known for, Vinny has been trained to not only, of course, to be able to detect people, but to be able to then do a corresponding analysis of are they wearing all the appropriate PPE, hard hat, high vis, glasses, gloves, and then I think it was just about 12 months ago, we had a customer request for face masks, as you can imagine, became a hot topic. Now we can, the way that data is utilized at our customers and at firms, again, going back to it, it's on the individual level. An individual observation made by our AI might be impactful on the project level, and it might spur a new conversation, a new topic at a meeting, or even a new meeting to talk about a topic that Vinny's bring to the forefront. The other way of looking at it, or another way that it's appreciated, is the aggregation of all of the insights that are made in the visualization of that data. That can actually help address a challenge that we hear from a lot of our customers. One that I'll steal the phrase, the normalization of deviation. So some projects and some tasks may excel at certain things, but we get very accustomed as human beings to our surroundings. So it's very common in especially projects in more remote areas for deviant behavior, so to speak, to become much more common. So to kind of sum up there, from project teams to business leader, really what we're trying to do is cultivate and share these objective insights that positively impact safety culture.
Okay. And then I think sticking, I suppose, a similar subject, Badr. Now you're working on digital technology for smart workforce planning. So again, what's the benefit? How's it helping?
Well, it arises from a challenge that we have. As you have seen, the capital program is dynamics. There is high and lows in it, and managing this huge resources that we have is really totally challenge for our side, especially the different disciplines, different levels, different positions. So what we have developed is an automated system where we plugged in based on our history, based on our performance of the last decades, and how many projects we have been executed, and what was the org chart or the manpower for those projects. That gives us the intelligence to plan for the future, the plan for the future project and the business plan. And that solutions, we just plugged in on it the new business plan of Saudi Aramco project management. And that will determine, based on the type of project, whether it's upstream, downstream, is it oil and gas, is it refining, is it infrastructure projects. Each category of project that we're executing, it has specific manpower planning for that specific type. That gives us intelligence to optimize our resources, not only optimization, but also planning for recruitment if we need to for the new resources that we have in the project. As a result, we never felt short in manpower because we always been optimized and planning ahead of the resources that we need in the future.
Okay, thank you. And then Keith, so we'll be moving shortly to audience questions. But Keith, I know that you've got quite an interesting example of use of RFID tagging as well. So explain how you're using it and what the benefits have been of that.
Yeah, so we've got a really interesting story with RFID. We've started using RFID about 10 years ago on a project where we started tagging our piping spools on a power project that was in the snow, and we were able to go out and continue the project because we were able to find the spools. And as we saw the value there, we began to grow the technology, leverage the technology in different ways, understanding when pieces of material were leaving the fabricator's shop, tracking them all the way through the porch, through customs, and then to the gate at the project. And so we were able to see how long things were taking, trending that data, understanding timelines, really trying to optimize our logistics and our traffic patterns in order to understand if we need a piece of equipment or if we need a piece of material, how long do we need to order it? How long is the fabrication process taking? How long does it take for us to actually requisition it in the field? How long is it taking us for us to find it in the laydown yard and then ship it to the site? we saw such benefit from this in terms of getting our material to our sites on time, ensuring that we weren't delayed in the field, ensuring that our craft supervisors were able to continue working on the plan, that we've expanded it significantly to other commodities in the field, whether that would be electrical cable reels, structural steel beams, rebar bundles, so on and so forth. And then as that picked up, our indirect side of the fence, which we all know on major capital projects, indirects, present a huge, or represent a huge section of the budget. We're able to optimize our planning around tool delivery, equipment delivery, things like where are our light plants, where are our generators, where are our welding machines that provide those services to our project. Where are our vans that are around the site that are taking people from place to place? Where are our trailers? If there's a trailer sitting in a location too long, what's going on there? Trying to identify those anomalies. And so I think it's a really great story because it shows that we started with a very small solution and we scaled it up, and we've changed the way that we've worked. We've changed the processes of procedures. We've changed the applications. I think that it's something that it gives us a great data set to compare, like Aref was referring to before, and John before, is how do you I guess trend that information or pair it with other subsets of data to try to identify things that are happening on the project that you may not have been able to ever do before. And so I really like telling that story because it's a huge success story, and it's something that's expanded in the industry significantly.
Yeah, and it's very interesting. And actually, I was talking to a company recently where picking up on just one aspect of what you were saying, their technology that they're using monitors idle time. So when the heavy equipment is on site, they're looking at how long is that heavy equipment just sitting on site idling. But of course, at the same time, pumping out pollutants and CO2 because it's a diesel vehicle, and then looking at that, analyzing that, and starting to understand how can we reduce that idle time so that not as much CO2 is emitted, which is again a great example and great use. It saves money because you're using less fuel, but it's also great in terms of reducing pollution into the atmosphere. Aref, I'm going to ask you a very brief question, and I'm moving to audience questions. So very briefly, predictive maintenance. It came up a lot when I was talking to people, even though we were talking about capital projects, which sort of surprised me a little bit because obviously you kind of associate that with the operational side. But is this just a reflection of people understand predictive maintenance and the digital technologies that can be used, or is it really that they're starting to plan their maintenance cycles from very early in their projects and making sure they've got everything in place?
It's brilliant you're asking me this question, especially for a construction company. As this reminds me of, the cycle you described in the beginning, from design to construction to commissioning to operation and maintenance. Everyone's trying to do their job right at that phase. It reminds me of a say once that they folded the eyes of 5 people and let them touch an elephant, and everyone described different objects because nobody sees the full elephant. And this is probably the construction industry today. Nobody's looking at, or rarely looking at, the full life cycle. Every project, capital project, is an asset. This asset is part of a system, and that system is part of a bigger complex system. That's why we look at infrastructure as systems of systems. Unless we look at that as owners, we have like Aramco here, the contractor like CC and Bechtel, technology provider like SmartVed and Oracle. Unless we all think of the full life cycle and design the operation and maintenance, which includes the predictive maintenance from day one, having a proper IoT strategy, big data strategy, cloud on the edge to minimize latency and other thing, and be able later on to design machine learning and artificial intelligence for predictive maintenance. Unless we do that from day one and the full cycle, and even if we don't realize the value, what was myth 5 years back is reality today. So let's design the IoT and collect the data, and who knows in 5 years what machine learning technique would be there to even improve far more than what predictive maintenance can give us today.
Okay. Thank you for a quick answer there. We'll move to questions from the audience. First question here, are there enough construction contractors ready and willing to implement technology in project execution? I see that as the most important enabler, and I don't think it is part of their plan given that they want to win low bids. So I'm guessing that's probably Aref or Keith.
I can answer that question.
Asset owner is the answer.
I can answer that question.
Okay.
Well, Robert, we look to the contractors as our partners. I'm talking to you now from a project site. That's why I'm wearing the FIC suits. When you have contractors and have a bonding contract with them, you need to help them. You need to give them the enablement on technology utilization. And that's why we have a dedicated section in our new contracts now to enable them to list all the technologies available in the constructions for those specific projects. And once we have the contracts signed in with the contractor, we help that contractor, which is our partner, in the journey of utilization of those technology and onboarding those technologies into construction site. And we have done this in several projects. I mean, Keith was talking about the RFID. We piloted the active RFIDs in our major facilities, and the contractor doesn't know about it at all. So we brought the suppliers and we brought the contractors and us all together as the partners, the technology provider, the owner, and the contractor, to understand the technology, what is the added value for it. We pilot it and we share the benefit, the added value to the contractors and to the clients. So you need also to have understanding from the contractor and the value proposition for those technologies. And that's what we've been doing in Saudi Arabia.
Okay. This question here, I think, says so much without actually writing too much, which is, how do you deal with rejections to new technology that has been tested, pilot tested, when, from the higher management? So how do you deal with your board rejecting the new technologies that you're piloting and obviously working on and believe in?
Hopefully you failed fast.
But, I think it's a good question in terms of, if you really believe in a technology that is being piloted, how do you actually turn that rejection around and make it, get them to see?
This is, if I may answer this, Rob, it's basically the same thing I answered earlier for the employees to create a purpose. The average age of a board in companies is higher usually than middle age. So that's additional challenge. You have to be a salesman. You have to show the purpose and show them the added value and how this helps the organization. Otherwise, if you fail, then change company.
Okay.
If you don't mind, Rob, I really liked Aref's, I guess representation of it earlier. You've got your A, B, and C players, and I feel like you've got that on all levels. That the quantity of each changes at every different level, and so what we've tried to do because we did have some of that at the beginning, and what we tried to do to change that is identify those senior management, project management type of senior executives that are going to champion these types of solutions so that they have an invested interest in the success. Now, whether or not it produces the results that we're looking for, that's a different story, but at least we wouldn't fail because we don't have that senior level support. So that's something that we've done internally, but it's a great representation of, you definitely have all of those categories at every single level, and it doesn't matter even it doesn't matter the age. It's just part of doing business.
Yeah, I think Aref's description I might steal and use in the future as well, because it was a great description, and I'm sure I won't be the only one. Another question here. I'm not sure, this might allude to something you said, Badr, but I'm not sure completely. Can the panel give an example of a new technology for scheduling in construction and how it is different from conventional approaches, manual entries, that sort of thing?
It's either me or Kate, I assume. It's contracted. Well, when it comes to scheduling or planning, better, scheduling is an activity of planning. I would advise the person asking question to read about advanced work packaging, AWP, which is basically, I see Kate nodding, agreeing, which is basically all plan, Primavera plan like before, will tell you what you need to achieve, but it will not go into how you're going to achieve it. Okay, the advanced work packaging will tell you how you're going to achieve that, and make sure the resources and all the engineering, etc., is aligned with that plan. So the answer would be advanced work packaging. That's my advice.
Yeah, and I think, Rob, we're seeing more AI being deployed in ML under scheduling as well and planning. So we're starting to see, what good should look like based on what organisations would capture. But again, back to Keith's point, if you capture bad data or non-normalized data, then it's extremely difficult for these technologies to deliver the value. So as we capture data from the plethora of tools that we're doing, the more normalized it can be, the greater value add it will be to the organizations that are using it.
Okay. How can you differentiate between, I think they mean a long-term innovation here, between a long-term innovation and a disruptive short-term innovation, and how does that affect the way that it is implemented? So I'm guessing that even the short-term has a benefit, but does it mean that you implement them in different ways?
Yeah, so I saw that question in the question box, and I've been thinking about how to answer it. I really believe that as you go, and especially if you have a disruptive type of solution, something that is going to cause a lot of ripples within your organization, I think that I really think that you have to have a strong plan in place in terms of how are you going to evaluate it, what is the business case, what are the KPIs, how are you going to train your people, how are you going to do all of these things to present and show the opportunity of this disruptive technology. If you don't have that, I think that it's going to make your path and journey significantly different. I think that's why, and there's been a mix of it, right? So I mean, it's you have these certain disruptive technologies where you've got these certain incremental technologies where you've got kind of these easy wins, but you've got a lot of them. You referenced the 3,000 businesses that have been created, and then you've got the ones down the line that change the way you do business. And so you have to approach that, and I kind of alluded to it earlier. You may have a bigger vision that's significantly disruptive at the end of the day, but it might be a 3, 5, 7, 10-year plan. But you've got to make those incremental gains along the way in order to support that long-term goal.
Okay. Final few questions. So how is the panel using digital technology to manage changes and therefore risk to capital projects that would otherwise cause failure? I'm not sure I completely understand that question, but I don't know if you do. I guess, how are you using it to avoid failure is what is meant. Is that, Badr?
Yeah, well, we need to understand one concept when we come to digital solutions and technologies. You have to have a culture for fail-safe, meaning is that you need to deploy our scout technologies with knowing that you may not succeed 100% in those technologies. You might achieve 70% of the intent of that technology. If you have that notion, if you have that understanding and the culture within your organizations, you will be having more guts to use and deploy technologies in your capital program. And trust me, the value will be there. Unless you identify technologies that totally useless, and that's also benefit. So technologies you should not be using in the future. But most of the technologies, you will use it and utilize it, and there will be a benefit for it. So you have to have the concept of fail-safe in those technologies.
Okay. So we'll move to the final question. Does the panel have a success story on how they used automation to improve productivity rather than replace labor to overcome the automation paradigm? So I guess, do you have success stories on how you've used automation to improve productivity, but not at the same time replace labor? Is that something that some of you have? Aref, you've unmuted, so.
Yeah, it's well, you want to replace labor. That's the objective of having robotics, AI, etc. You want to elevate that construction. One of the least digitized industries, and one of the most industries that relies on manual labor. in 2021. That's a shame. We should try to elevate our work, and all the labor stuff ultimately should be done with robotics, with AI, with stuff like that, which improves safety and not only productivity. So I don't see a bad thing in eliminating labor. I think this is a failure that we still have so many laborers in construction companies.
Okay. Any other final comments on that particular question? All right. So thank you very much. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us today. And obviously, we really appreciate the different time zones. But actually, it's been great to get input from people in so many countries. That has been really interesting to hear. Thank you to the audience. Thank you for your questions. That, again, always enhances a webinar when you start to get questions from the audience, because you start to really see the pain points or challenges that they're trying to tackle. I think it's been a really interesting discussion. We've covered a lot of areas that we're clearly going to see grow and become far more common in the future. As I said at the beginning, we are planning to produce an insight report based on partly from today and the discussion we've had today, the roundtable, and also some other research that we've been doing. That will be made available in probably a month or so, and we will notify everybody who's attending today on email once it is available. So with that, thank you very much for your time. Thank you very much for all your questions and all your really interesting answers.